Hello folks, Dick Fairburn here. Back into a blustery day here in Illinois. Warm Texas weather behind me. I want to talk about a kind of a new and a very old phenomenon in carrying guns for self-protection. The backup gun. Today we call it a bug backup gun. Back in the days of the Wild West, they would call it more of a hideout gun. Now today, police officers often will carry like a 5-shot J-frame revolver or a little mini .380 pistol or something like that. But back in the day, it was the Derringer. Very often was the backup gun of gunfighters, gamblers, or just businessmen out to protect themselves. Today, we're going to talk about hideout guns. Stick around.
Right there. Give me your wallet.
Take it a little easy with that cannon, mister.
Just throw me your wallet.
Yes, sir. A little something extra.
You done murdered me.
No, but you're gonna have a long winter bellyache, you boob. Give me that wallet. Just the wallet.
I can hardly move. You done shot a hole in my stomach.
I appreciate that.
You ain't gonna leave me here.
Well, it's quite obvious that's what you were gonna do to me. Get out of the way. Oh! Mister, you better find yourself another line of work. This one sure don't fit your pistol.
Yes, even John Wayne in his last movie, The Shootist, made use of a hideout gun rather effectively. So let's talk about Derringers. Can a 2-shooter actually help you survive some kind of an attack on the street? Yeah, maybe it can. They come anything from .22 rimfire up to calibers bigger than you would probably want to shoot. Now there are 2 ways to spell Derringer. D-E-R-I-N-G-E-R, that's 1 R. Or the more common nowadays, Derringer, D-E-R-R-I-N-G-E-R. And really, both are correct. The 1 R version, Derringer, came from the original. And I'll talk about that as I go along. So these things range from the original, which was just 1 barrel, 1 shot, up to 4 barrels. Now, when I'm talking about hideout guns, I'm not really talking about little mini .25 automatics or the duck foot that had several barrels that splayed out different directions, or even the pepper box, which was sort of a crude revolver, although, in the one John Wayne movie, he said, be careful, they can't all go off at the same time. So that's not really what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about a Derringer, and the most common form we see of these is a 2-barrel over-under. Now the original Derringer, created by a guy named Henry Derringer, who spelled his name with 1 R, D-E-R-I-N-G-E-R. He worked in Philadelphia, gunmaker there, and in about 1825 he invented that single barrel muzzle loading. It was a cap lock, not a flintlock, and most of them were about .41 caliber. What's the most famous Derringer of all time? Undoubtedly, the one used to kill President Abraham Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth used a .44 caliber cap, ball, muzzle loading Derringer to shoot Lincoln in the back of the head. The most common Derringer we see out there was made by Remington, a .41 rimfire. It was generally made from about 1866 to 1935, and they estimate over 150,000 were made. A lot of these things are still out there. A lot of them are nickel. And that 41 rimfire cartridge was pretty feeble to begin with, and it's extremely rare to find ammo for it now. I believe Numeric or Navy Arms, one of those companies, made a run of it a number of years ago. But basically, you can't find ammo for them. There was a Sharps 4-barrel rimfire that had an 1859 patent. This was another rimfire. They came in 22, 30, 32. More modern types of Derringers. I mean, these things have almost always been in production since the 1820s. High Standard made a double action Derringer from 1962 to about 1984. These came in 22 long rifle or 22 Winchester Magnum rimfire. A number of years ago, when I was a deputy sheriff out in Wyoming, we had one of these High Standard Derringers in our inventory. It had been used in a crime. The court had awarded it to the department, so we later ended up using it as trading material to get things that we needed for the department. It was a Magnum, and a buddy and I took it out to shoot it one time just to see what it was like. This was a double action. Didn't really have a trigger guard. I'll show a picture of it here as we go along. The thing that impressed me was the noise and the muzzle blast of a 22 Magnum rimfire. Of course, you're only burning the powder in about 1 inch of barrel, so a lot of that powder is burning outside the barrel. It sounded pretty mean. I'm not sure it really carried all that much power. Would it do as a backup gun in a pinch? Yeah, and I actually knew at least one cop who carried one as a backup gun. In about 1979, a Derringer called the COP, C-O-P, came out. It was a 4-barrel stainless steel, chambered for .357 Magnum. As Derringers go, it was pretty big and heavy. I'm not sure how effective it was, but I ended up with one of these as a police officer when I took it off a guy who had used it to crank off a round at his neighbor when they were both drunk and unhappy. Luckily, he didn't hit anything, and eventually that weapon was returned to him after the court case. Bond Arms is probably the largest current producer of these types of weapons. Bond produces these in a plethora of calibers and sizes, everywhere from rimfire cartridges up to 45-70, 50 Action Express. I'm told one of their more popular models chambers either a 45 Colt cartridge or a 2.5 inch 410 shotgun round. Companies are now producing self-defense loads in 2.5 inch 410 shells. Probably a pretty good handful in a small 2-shot Derringer, but probably a fair amount of power as well. There's a company called American Derringer. They make many handgun calibers. They do make reproductions of that High Standard double action Derringer now. And they make it in both 22 long rifle and a scaled up version in 38 special, which to my notion, if you're going to use one, I think would be probably the best bet. There's an Inland Liberator out there, which is a 45 ACP caliber, 2-barrel over under. Pedersoli in Italy even makes a caplock version, kind of a copy of the original style Derringer, in 44 caliber. Now I showed you one here. I don't own a Derringer. I might someday. They're kind of cool. Borrowed this from a buddy. This is a Gregorelli and Uberte Gadone from Italy. So kind of like Pedersoli. This is in caliber 38 special, and this pattern, made by either domestic producers or overseas producers, is probably the most current and the most modern thing that you can find out there in the market. And they don't sell for a lot of money. They're not exactly a $1,000 plus 1911 pistol. How do they work? They have a lever on the side. You swing the lever, the barrels come open, drop your rounds in, close it back up, secure that lever, and now it's a single action. I have to cock it each time I want to fire it. And the mechanism in there rotates between two firing pins, whether they are rimfire or center fire, to fire alternately. You don't know for sure which one you're going to get, top or bottom, but on the second shot you'll get the other. They're kind of heavy for no bigger than they are, but they are still certainly pocket size. Now, a buddy of mine in Wyoming decided that, and this was before the days of legal concealed carry, but he wasn't really concerned with that. He decided the best thing that he could get away with carrying would probably be a 2-shot Derringer. So he bought one almost identical to this. And when he ordered it, he said, well, you know, I can get one in 38 Special or I can get one in 357 Magnum, and they cost the same. So I might as well get the Magnum version. I can always shoot 38s in it. So he got it. He came up to my house, my little impromptu range in behind the house, and we were shooting it. And at reasonable range of maybe 3 or 4 yards, you could keep it pretty easily centered on a man-sized target. Not bad. So he handed it to me. I shot a couple of wad cutters out of it. I loaded it back up, but me being me, I had a couple of Winchester 357 Magnum silver tip rounds that at the time was our duty round in our revolvers. It fired 145 grain silver tip hollow point, a very hot 357 load. So I dropped one of those in there and handed it back to him. And without looking, he cocked it and fired one and cussed me severely because the recoil brought this thing back kind of like this. Actually cut him a little bit right there before the gun went flying out of his grip to land in the dirt behind us. And so he called me a lot of bad names, and I said, you know, Dan, this is your fault because you, of all people, should know never to trust a guy like me. If I hand you a loaded gun, the smartest thing you can do is look in there and see what I loaded it with. So he disagreed. He thought it was my fault. So the Derringer worked for him. He always wore tall cowboy boots. He had the local boot maker stitch him kind of a little holster in the top of that boot. He carried that Derringer with him for years. He never needed it. He never pulled it out. But if he found himself in a bind, he had 2 shots of 38 wad cutters that he figured he could dissuade a bad guy. Of course, he had about a 8-inch blade knife on the other side of that boot, so although he might have walked a little bit lopsided with all the weight in that boot, he was pretty well armed. So we can definitely say that from the time of the assassination of Lincoln to the present, this little pocket-sized Derringer has been chosen for both defensive and even offensive use by both good people and bad people. That's the Derringer. Now, one of the coolest tricks, and I'm not sure it ever really happened out west, was the idea that you could put one up your sleeve and with a thrust of your hand, that Derringer could be put into the palm of your hand ready for instant use. Here's a movie example.
I insist. If you insist.
Personally, I don't think I would ever choose a Derringer as my primary self-defense pistol. But I know at least one person who does. Now, as a backup weapon, a bug, a hideout gun, I think a Derringer might make a little bit of sense. As I said, these are generally 2-shooters in the form you find them nowadays. They'll drop in your pocket with ease. They're comfortable on your ankle in a holster. They're comfortable on your belt and even perhaps in the top of a boot. So I think if you're gonna consider a Derringer as something more than just a novelty, and you know, in some cowboy action shooting matches, they do have little side matches where they have Derringer shoots. If you're gonna consider one, I would say probably a 38 Special would be your best bet. And one thing I want to talk about, I'm going to shoot it here a little bit. You got to watch these things safety-wise. Now, I'm not aware of anyone shooting themselves with a Derringer when they didn't really mean to, but it's possible. And one thing you've got to consider is that when you cock this thing and you fire this thing, The hammer is down, it is resting on one of those pins. So, I'll show you some close-ups here as we go. We throw the lever, we open the action, and if you look in here, in the frame, one of these firing pins is protruding. That's the one that would have fired when you pulled the trigger. Now that thing will not push in. It's solid there. So if you were to load this thing and flip it over hard like that, it's a distinct possibility that that protruding firing pin could fire that chamber. Now I'm holding it kind of like this, but if I were holding it like this and I smacked that thing down hard, that sucker could go off. You know, the only really safe way to reload these, gotta have everything just right. They're not exactly a fast operating pistol here. The proper way to reload one of these after being fired is to pull that hammer back to half cock. And what that does is take the hammer off of those firing pins. Now, when I open this, look in the frame, there are no firing pins protruding there. The breech face is flat and it is safe. But even then, if I drop rounds in there, I don't want my hand down under this thing. I'm flagging myself. So you got to be careful how you load them. You got to grip them up here, drop in the rounds, rotate it closed, lock the action, all without getting your hand out in front of this thing. Now we can cock it. You saw it was empty. Dry fire, cock again, fire the second one. I apologize for banging noises. We had a hellacious windstorm here. A couple of the shutters on our rain shed out here are not secured now, and I didn't bring anything to fix them. So it's a little bit windy today. Got some banging in the background. So once again, you bring this thing out, you got to cock it, fire one, fire two. You always going to handle it one-handed? No, not necessarily. If you got a second hand available, you can get up there and cock that thing more quickly and get a couple of shots off quickly. Is this a prime defensive weapon? No, certainly not. Is it going to be good at 10 yards, 15 yards, 25 yards? Not unless you put an awful lot of practice time on it. And the sights are about as crude as they can get. I don't really think they were designed for accurate use by the makers. Now, if you're going to use one of these for self-defense, what kind of ammo would you use? Personally, I think a 38 wad cutter is probably your very best choice. Mild recoil, flat face, going to do some damage. Chances of getting expansion out of this very low velocity, very short barrel, slim anyway. But here's what you want to watch for with some of these. And as I said, this is an Italian. I think the quality of it's pretty good, but they're just made to a little bit different standards. Here are a couple of 38s. These are just some light practice loads I use with lead bullets and various 38s. 38s drop right in there. Nice. Keep your hand away. Now, here's a round of Federal 357 Magnum 125 grain jacketed hollow point. Probably one of the more effective loads ever available for 357 revolvers for self-defense. It drops right in there. Now this is marked 38 special, but it will very easily chamber a 357 Magnum cartridge. It's simply a matter of how the chamber is cut. Now it's possible when these things were made, and this is a fairly low number, this is like 2400, 2200 serial range. It's possible that they sold them in both 38 and 357. I don't know. And maybe the 357s were just marked differently, so they made one model, marked them for whatever they wanted. But a 357 will fit in there perfectly. Recoil-wise, it's going to be a bear. Pressure-wise, I don't know if this is really rated for a 357 cartridge because it's marked 38. So be careful what you do with these things. Check them, see if that 357 will drop in there. If it does, I'd think long and hard before I touched very many of them off in there. What about a rimfire cartridge? 22 long rifle, be very easy to shoot. It's going to do as much damage out of this as it would out of a small revolver. It's not a first choice. If you can carry this kind of weapon and you can stand much recoil, I think I'd probably go for the 38 Special if you can handle it. Beyond that, the 357s, the 45 ACP, perhaps that inland model. I have not fired one. The big gun, I mean the 45-70 in this is got to be, I mean look on YouTube, you can see videos of them being shot. What a beast. I'm not sure you're gaining a lot of effect for that kind of power, because this is not a, you know, a prime A-grade defensive weapon to begin with. So having said that, let's turn around, let's go down to those targets downrange, and let's see what these things will actually do. As I said, these things can be a little bit dangerous. Short barrels, you can get your hand out in front when you're loading, handling. First thing we're going to do, half cock. Half cock is going to withdraw those firing pins so they're not in contact with the primer. Unlatch the action. Open it. A couple of my light 38 loads. Watch your fingers, don't get ahead of that muzzle. Rotate the action closed. Keep it down range. Latch the action locked. Half cock. Eyes, ears, we are range safe. The sights are very crude. Some shoot low, some shoot high. You're going to have to check it with whatever load you decide to stake your life on. Okay, these are just some light lead reloads. Cock it. A little bit high. More in the center. It's fired. Half cock. Retract those firing pins, make it safe. Unlock the action. Watch the muzzle. There is an extractor here that'll push them up a little bit. You may have to pull them out. Wad cutters are probably your best all-around carry load. Mild recoil, flat, blunt face, going to cut its way through blood vessels rather than tear its way through. It's more effective. Again, a couple of my light reloads. Watch the muzzle. Rotate. Downrange. Latch the action. Let's go for some precise headshots. I'm at about 3 yards. Probably a very realistic distance to be shooting a weapon of this type. Little high. You got to watch where your sights are going to be used. That's a headshot. Another kind of load is a multi-ball load. Remington loaded these a few years ago for both 38s, 357s. I made up some of my own a few years ago. This is 2 triple-aught buckshot. They're about 3.60 diameter. So 2 round balls loaded over a light charge. You can see here, these 2 holes are almost touching. A couple rounds of those multi-ball loads are going to do a pretty good job. There are some companies out there, even if they're not making multi-balls, they have multi-stacked projectiles. Often 2 cone-shaped projectiles stacked behind each other. So drilling 2 holes every time you pull the trigger when you've only got 2 rounds, not a bad idea with a little pea shooter like this. The importance of carrying this kind of weapon, loading and carrying this kind of weapon on half cock, is that if the hammer is all the way down, one of those firing pins is resting against the primer of a cartridge in there. So if this is all the way down, and you get a sudden rap on that, maybe you're carrying it in a pocket, something smacks into the back of it. If you drop it and it falls on the hammer, it's going to discharge. It's going to fire the round under that firing pin. Now that's no different than a Colt single action Army or one of the clones. There are other older type weapons that will rest that firing pin against a primer when the hammer's down. So with the Colt single action Army, the best way to do it is to load 5, put the hammer over the empty chamber. Empty chamber on this makes it a 1-shooter, and you got to figure out which one's going to be the empty chamber. Best thing to do, put it on half cock. These are not the safest weapons you're ever going to get your hands on, but that's about the safest way to carry it. Folks, if you enjoy these videos, please give me a thumbs up, a subscription, or resubscription if YouTube has seen fit to kick you off. Derringers are cool. I've always thought that. As I said, some cowboy shooting matches will have a side match for Derringers, so we're seeing them out there being used a little bit in competition. Not my choice of a first level self-defense weapon, but not a bad backup gun or a hideout gun. And I guess if it's all you got, well, those 2 shots are better than nothing. Folks, if you have not yet voted for the NRA Board of Directors, the deadline for getting those ballots in is April 6th. So you can still fill it out, get it in. I encourage you to go to the website electanewNRA.com. There are 28 reform-minded candidates there who want to turn the NRA around. Make it as good or better than it ever was before. I'm one of those. I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for you to vote for all 28 of those candidates and put a really good supermajority of like-minded people on that NRA Board of Directors. If you've lost your magazine, if you get the electronic version, you didn't get a ballot, you still have time to contact the NRA Secretary's office, request a ballot or a replacement ballot, and you can still vote. If you're a believer in the NRA and you still want to see this organization succeed, this is your chance to do it. Derringers. Kind of cool. And still deadly. Y'all be safe out there.
Okay, we got them both here now. You ready? Bud got one. Ginger got one. Oh, she missed it. She usually gets them, doesn't she, Bud? Okay, girl, last one. You ready? You ready? Yeah! That's all there is till next time.